Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee for September 18th, 2017. I'm Paul Krikorian, Chair of the Committee. I'm joined by my colleague, Councilmember Blumenfield, and Mr. Kretz will be here in a moment. But we're going to go ahead and begin with our general public comment because we have a number of people here who appear to want to be heard, so we're going to go ahead and start on that. So I'd like to invite up as our first speaker Beverly Roberts, followed by Patrick Smith, followed by Bruce Campbell. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Okay. Shall I begin?
Go right ahead, ma'am.
Okay. My name is Beverly Roberts, and I'm with ACE and the Committee for Better Banks, a group of consumers, bank workers, unions, and community groups demanding bank accountability for all banks that do business with the City of Los Angeles. The time is now to stop banks from hurting our community and hurting bank workers. A strong RBO should be passed before the RFP is released. Sales goals in banking hurt our community. Workers need a voice and a whistleblower protection. Banking rules and laws should be tied to RFP if we are going to hold all banks accountable. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. Our next speaker is Patrick Smith, followed by Bruce Campbell, followed by Heidi Kang.
My name is Patrick Smith. I'm with ACE and also the banking committee, the committee for better banking. We are here asking the Budget and Finance Committee not to release the RFP until an appropriate legal language addressing the RBO pertaining to sales goals and predatory practices such as sale goals and whistleblower protection is addressed properly in order to govern these banks from not taking advantage of the consumers. The only way this would happen if we address the issue by coming up with laws that will protect consumers and see to it that we are not get fleeced by the banking industry.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Our next speaker, we won't have applause. Our next speaker is Bruce Campbell, followed by Heidi Kang, followed by Trinity Tran. Mr. Campbell.
Good day, Chair Krikorian and Mr. Blumenfield. I'm Bruce Campbell. I support cleaning up LA City's Banking Act. LA should be undertaking thorough research to avoid a wide array of environmentally damaging investments by banks.
Hold this time, please. I need to have it quiet in here.
But at least dump the obvious scammer, Wells Fargo, who opened millions of bogus accounts, and the company with huge investments in planet-damaging petrochemical pipelines on top of key sources of water. Seeing that it was sales goals that led to Wells Fargo scamming regarding opening bogus accounts, a new LA City agreement with the bank should not include sales goals, and employees need to get a living wage so they won't be tempted by incentives to scam customers. I call for a delay in the RFP and in the RBO until language is included to exclude Wells Fargo from further banking consideration and to disallow any bank with which the City of LA shall have accounts from allowing such sales goals incentives. Plus, please make sure that whistleblowers are protected in this legislation.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Heidi Kang, followed by Trinity Tran, followed by Tren Triola. I'm sorry if I got that wrong, but all right, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Heidi King, and I'm with Divest LA. Los Angeles is a landmark for progressive ideals for many, and it's time we truly follow up to our reputation by continuing to divest all funds from unethical financial institutions such as Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo's national CRA rating of below satisfactory automatically makes them ineligible to bid on the city's RFP contract as per our own rules. Furthermore, Wells Fargo's history of predatory practices, disregard for the environment, and the recent news of opening over 3.4 million fraudulent accounts to meet sales quotas is ethically unacceptable and will speak volumes of our own ethical standards if we continue to do business with them. I urge City Council to debundle funds, rank the banks submitting banking services, and tier banks when considering placements of city funds to incorporate Divest LA's socially responsible RFB policy recommendations. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate your considerations in this manner.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Trinity Tran, followed by...
True.
I'm sorry. You know what? I've gotten this wrong before, haven't I?
That's all
What-
right.
Okay, I'm going to
No harm
remember.
done.
True Truola, followed by Michelle Milner.
We'd like to thank the Office of Finance and the Budget and Finance Committee for reporting back on the city's divestment from Wells Fargo and the RFP. Back in June, the chairman of the committee and council members discussed decentralizing the city from too big to fail banks, which we wholeheartedly agree. We want the city to give preference to socially responsible banks using a tiered system when determining where to place their public funds. So we're asking the committee and the Office of Finance to debundle the city's contracts with Wells Fargo, rank the banks, and tier the banks through the RFP process. Using this three-tiered system, Tier 1 banks would be banks that are explicitly socially responsible, like B Corps and CDFIs. Tier 2 are banks that have a good record on both internal and external ethics, and Tier 3 are financial institutions with a few fractions. And as the recent Wells Fargo scandal, 3.5 million fake scandals account shows that their actions do affect the community. So we ask the city to enforce the federal CRA rating, as that gives us a more comprehensive look of their disparaging national record. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So our next speaker is True Truola, followed by Michelle Milner, followed by Aparna. Sorry, Bacalet. You know what? That was going to be my guess. So go ahead.
Hi, my name is True, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to speak today. I would like to reiterate the three-pronged approach that we would really think would be sufficient in order to facilitate the debundling, first and foremost, by taking our accounts out of unethical organizations that Wells Fargo continues to prove that they are. We would like to rank the banks by submitting the banking services so we can actually tier them and choose which organizations are going to be most appropriate for a socially responsible charter that the residents of the city of Los Angeles deserve. As climate change continues to be an issue, I think it's more important than ever that we make the conscious decision to divest from fossil fuels moving forward, and also organizations that support these industries that are not serving our communities and our future. So as somebody who deserves a planet to live on in the future and clean water, I can personally say that we would really appreciate your efforts in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Michelle Milner, followed by Aparna Bacalet, followed by Carol Kravitz. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. We've been on this journey now for a couple of months, and I think it's fair to say that we're walking up the temple stairs and we're at the table of the money lenders. And we have to ask ourselves, is it okay if just a few coins drop for some nonprofits in the city? Are we going to turn and look the other way? Or are we going to face what's actually happening at these tables? We need to hold the banks responsible for environmental concerns, social concerns, and the internal governance. Elizabeth Warren just announced that she's calling for the entire board of Wells Fargo to be replaced. The Federal Reserve has that capability to do that. That's how bad it is. There were 25,000 people who had their cars wrongfully repossessed recently. So what we need to do is continue with the debundling of the accounts, rank those banks. There's a way to do it, and we can still have a banker, and then just determine which ones are the best ones to deal with for our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. It's a pleasure to be here today with you all. I'm sure that the Budget and Finance Committee is familiar with this, but I don't know how many others are. Next year's budget will be $5.8 billion, a record, as revenues are expected to increase by $238 million. That's 4.3%. The real problem is future budgets, as the four-year outlook anticipates a budget gap of $104 million in the following year that begins July 1st, 2018. But in her memo of May 12th, the chief legislative analyst warned that pension liability claims, workers' comp, and labor costs may exceed the projected levels. This implies a budget gap considerably more than $104 million. Therefore, we are requesting that you amend the existing request for proposal and responsible banking ordinance to include stronger social and environmental criteria when considering banking contracts.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Carol Kravitz, followed by Leslie Eze. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much for letting us have time to talk about this debundling of city assets from Wells Fargo Bank. Yes, Wells Fargo has had a great reputation of community outreach, and they should, because they've been around for over 160 years, and they've been taking our money, and really they were the only game in town in the wild, wild west for a really, really long time. So it doesn't exempt them, however, from being socially responsible in their investments. The finance report submitted last month indicated that social responsibility will be guided by the RBO and the CRA. And I have to say, they are not considered very progressive or encompassing documents of social responsibility. And my goal, and the goal of Divest LA, is to have the city amend the existing RFP and RBO to include much stronger social and environmental criteria when ranking banks for consideration on all banking contracts. Please add the RBO amendment as soon as possible so the RFP and the RBO can act in conjunction with one another as this process moves forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry. Hold on. Sorry. Go right ahead.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm here to strongly advocate for the debundling of the 800 accounts the City of LA currently has with Wells Fargo. Decentralizing the city's finances would allow the city more autonomy to adhere to its hopefully soon-to-be strengthened responsible banking ordinance and move away from the too-big-to-fail relationship it currently has with Wells Fargo. Unbundling accounts would also allow opportunities for contracts with smaller community banks, credit unions, and local subcontractors. These opportunities would provide more financial security for our city, as well as demonstrate the Council's commitment to environmental sustainability, ethical business practices, and community development, both on a local and national scale. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Williams, I believe that concludes general public comment with the exception of Mr. Herman, who has multiple matters. So I'd like to ask Mr. Herman to come up to speak on his multiple matters, including his general public comment. So give him his 2 minutes for his agenda items, and then we'll give him his 1 minute separately for general public comment, please.
Now that we're talking about the budget, let us talk about the Kevin Kenny versus the City of Los Angeles regarding a traffic accident on March 24th, 2013. Or how about Jose Fragoso versus the City of Los Angeles on a disability discrimination retaliation violation of the Fair Employment Housing Act, FEHA? Or let's go to item number 2 regarding what? First Amendment Coalition regarding city records. Better, let's go to item 4. The so-called 5th place loser Mitchell Englander of the 12th District versus William K.W. Yao versus the City of Los Angeles in regards to a traffic accident which occurred September 7, 2014. Why the fuck are we holding back from paying these settlements? Pay these people their settlements, pre-settlement, and you stop gushing the budget of this city to pay on all these liability lawsuits. Pre-settlement. get it, gentlemen. Fuck. Stupid. Then we go to item 666. Alexandra Levensky versus the City of Los Angeles. The matter, refund utility taxes. Yeah, we're fucking tired of our utility taxes going up the ass. That's why there were people protesting regarding the DWP's idea to tunnel water into our community. But with what action? No fucking Hispanics working that line. All Caucasian like me, bitches. Then I go into item number 7, Sacramento County Superior Court. And that deals with the City of Los Angeles regarding community redevelopment. I thought we were killed in demise of the LA City. Redevelopment, CRLA, fuck you. Then we go into the Claims Board meeting Monday, September 18, 2017, regarding Napa versus the County of Sacramento in the court case of Olmsted, OOLMSTEAD, to recognize the very concerns describing the adverse effects of homelessness. We would suffer regressive consequences, gentlemen. The voters voted for Measure H. H, bitch, 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 fuck, all of you white niggers too. Put into the budget to get the homeless population off the goddamn street and not in the shelters. Because I will continue this protest. I will continue to object to the issue of the budget and how it impacts the adverse atrocities of humanity's life on our streets. The same way I went up to Anaheim's homeless situation, and I said, fuck you too.
So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Mr. Herman's performance art, I apologize for the misogyny and racism and generally disgusting profanity that he brings to every single meeting. So it comes with the territory, unfortunately. I'd like to call item number 8 for purposes of taking comment in that matter as well. So Mr. Stephen Mejia is our speaker on that item. So come on up, Mr. Mejia.
Good afternoon, council members, and thank you so much for your time. My name is Stephen Mejia. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Manager for Friends of Los Angeles River. Just wanted to, in regard to the the design agreement between the city and the Army Corps of Engineers. We've been working with you for decades on this project. The city's been investing heavily in terms of revitalizing the LA River in support of water and community health, in support of open space. And we really just wanted to come out and congratulate the city departments and in conversation with the Army Corps of Engineers for their creative work in looking at this stretch in order to maximize the sort of benefits of the planning and design money to actually achieve something long-term successful for the Arbor project. So just wanted to say thank you very much for this approach. I wanted to just publicly acknowledge the city and the Army Corps departments for that. We're really looking forward to working with you to implement this even further. Obviously, this is delivering on a promise that we started many, many, many years ago. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. Folks, can I just get a show of hands as to who is here to hear from the public to hear the report on the river? Okay. So then I'd like to thank you, Mr. Mejia. I appreciate it. So I'd like to hold number 8 on the table then, and we'll go ahead next to our closed session. Before we do that, are there any comment cards on items 9, 10, 11, or 12?
No, sir. No, other than Mr. Herman.
Well, actually, to approve the consent calendar, we need one more member as well. So we'll just go ahead and proceed directly into closed session then. Is there a request for priority on any of the closed session items, Tony? 1 and then 4. Okay. So we're going to go into closed session now, folks. So we're going to need to ask you to step out so we can proceed with that, including the members of the press. All right, we are back in open session in the Budget and Finance Committee, and members, I would recommend items 9, 10, 11, and 12 for approval on consent. And if there's no objections, it will be the action of the committee to approve each of those items. And that brings us then to item number 8. Thank you. Item number 8.
Item number 8 is a Bureau of Engineering report and communications relative to initiation of design for the United States Army Corps of Engineers Los Angeles River Ecosystems Restoration Project. On August 23, 2017, the Arts, Entertainment, Parks, and River Committee approved the recommendation in the Public Works Bureau of Engineering report as amended.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for your patience. Sorry about the long closed session.
No apology necessary.
The river has waited this long.
We've all learned patience for sure. Just let the team assemble here. I'll introduce myself. My name is Michael Affelt. On behalf of Bureau of Engineering and the Mayor's Office, Ellie River Works Office, and City Services, and joined here by representatives from the Army Corps of Engineers, Daryl Buxton and Mark Golay.
Welcome.
Project managers for this project. And
Blair Miller, Office of the CAO.
okay, great. So thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Again, Mike Affelt on behalf of Engineering and the LA River Works Office. The item before you today is seeking approval to begin the design elements for the Ellie River Ecosystem Restoration Feasibility Study, also known in some cases as the Arbor Study. So the, as you probably recall, the ecosystem study, ecosystem project was an effort that we engaged on with the Army Corps of Engineers in partnership. The city is a local sponsor for the Army Corps of Engineering project, and we adopted the resulting plan, recommended plan for that project last year in 2016 at the local level. And then it was authorized at the federal level by U.S. Congress in December of 2016. And so now before you today, we are seeking approval to move forward in the first phases of design. So we finished the feasibility analysis phase, and now we'd like to start actually designing and getting into implementation of the first elements of the plan. So I would like to actually turn over the floor to our partners at the Army Corps of Engineers, who will walk us through a brief outline of the proposed first steps of design, as well as the proposal to enter into a design agreement together for the partnership between the city and the Army Corps of Engineers. So I'll turn it over to Mark.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, council members. My name is Mark Golay, and I'm the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Project Manager for the LA River Ecosystem Restoration Project. As identified in the feasibility study, this project is an opportunity to bring back critical riparian habitat to a river that has lost over 90% of what once existed. Because we have successfully completed the feasibility study, we are ready to begin the design phase in preparation for the construction phase. A design agreement between the City of Los Angeles and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers will enable this design to begin. I will provide a summary of the scope of work for the design agreement, the associated cost estimate, and an overview of the funding process. But first, it is important to highlight that we are proposing to change the channel for the first time since the flood risk management project was implemented in the 1940s. This is a transition from thinking of the LA River as a pure drainage system to one that incorporates ecosystem restoration opportunities. Therefore, extensive analysis is necessary to ensure that current flood risk reduction conditions are maintained and we do not induce additional flood risk to the area. On this slide, council members, is the Arbor Reach, the 11 miles of the project footprint from the city of Burbank downtown to downtown LA. Our recommended scope for the design agreement is to focus on a 500-foot section of terrace bank on the west side of the river just south of Main Street and the restored wetlands and river connection to the Los Angeles State Historic Park, also known as cornfields. So these are the two focus areas here. The cornfields feature in the north of the page, and then in the center, the 500-foot terrace bank. The design effort would include complete, ready-for-construction design of the 500-foot terrace bank section, long lead design activities for the cornfields feature, a partial design of the cornfields feature, and a water flow analysis of the full 11 miles of the Arbor Reach. Following this design phase, the City and the Corps of Engineers will enter a project partnership agreement for the construction phase, in which the 500-foot terrace bank will be constructed and design and construction of the cornfields feature and all other features will be completed. The following is the estimated cost of work performed under the design agreement. $3.6 million for a complete design of, $3.6 million for a complete design of the 500-foot terrace bank on the west side of the river just south of Main Street. This is a 4.5-year effort. $2 million of river-wide analyses that will inform current and future designs. $1.3 million of long lead activities for the design of the cornfields feature. An overall contingency of $1.2 million for a total design effort of $8.1 million. Please note these are design costs only. The cost for construction of the 500-foot terrace bank is estimated to be $5.2 million, excluding costs of lands, easements, rights-of-way, relocations, and disposal areas, which will be the city's responsibility to provide. Construction is estimated to take 18 to 24 months after its initiation. The funding process for the design agreement is as follows. From the design schedule and cost estimate, we have an anticipated annual cash contribution from the city for the duration of the design agreement. This anticipated annual contribution will be coordinated with the city as it develops its annual budget. The federal fiscal year is from October 1st to September 30th. In preparation for the start of each federal fiscal year, we will make a request to the city for its annual cash contribution. We expect this request will be made by August 1st each year. Our funds request to the city will be contingent upon the amount of funds the Corps of Engineers expects to receive for the project. The Corps of Engineers must maintain the proper cost share balance for each federal fiscal year. Therefore, if any given year the city does not contribute its share, work will stop. The Corps of Engineers currently has $400,000 on hand to begin the design. Once the design agreement is signed and these funds are available for use, we will send a written request to the city for the matching contribution of $400,000. I'll conclude my remarks by stating that the Corps of Engineers will work in close coordination with the city every step of the way, and we look forward to changing the river together. Thank you.
So just to sum up, it's the first element of design. The larger 11-mile project is still the goal and the vision that we will continue to work through. This is the first place we're starting. An $8.1 million design project. We're 50-50 cost-sharing partners in that. The first year, to match their $400,000 appropriation that they have available to them now, the city would match, and there are $400,000 available in identified funds, so that's ready to go. And then for the upcoming fiscal year, we would coordinate on a request to match their identified funding. And we're happy to answer any questions at all, please.
Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you to the Corps for your partnership on this. It's been, a lot of us have looked at this project for, a long time. Measured in decades, I think, rather than years. And to see things finally coming to fruition is really, it's exciting and it's rewarding, and it's terrific to see, strong partnership from the Corps. So thank you. That being said, one of the points that you made in your presentation that caught my ear in terms of this committee is if the city in any of these given fiscal years does not provide its share, then work will stop. Is the converse also true? Because, we're going to be approving a 5-year or so spending plan here for this. Obviously, I'm assuming each year is an individual budgetary commitment that will have to be contained in the city's budget. If something unforeseen happens, we've made this plan, but the actual appropriation will be made in each year's budget. Am I right about that?
Yes.
That's what the recommendation before us is. So at the same time, since we're all friends here, we can say that the federal government right now, is a little tumultuous in terms of its budgetary vision for the future. And I think none of us can be entirely sure where the priorities for spending will be over the next 5 years. So if we begin down this road of beginning an engineering and design plan, what happens if the federal government decides to cut you off on this? Where do we go with that? I mean, how do we ensure that this is not money down the drain then?
Sir, Darrell Buxton, council members. Your question is a great one, and we don't control what Congress appropriates. So if we don't expect to receive funds in any given year, we would not ask for a matching share, and work would be affected, would stop.
And I guess since this is still at the design and engineering stage, it's not whatever we finish is preserved. It's not as though we're stopping in the middle of a project. We have the benefit of that, and if we have to skip a couple years and before we resume it, at least it wouldn't have the value of that. Most of the value of that would not be lost. Mr. Blumenfield? Oh, you know what? The other, I suspect we're probably going to think along the same terms. Obviously, this is a long-term commitment to the river. This is the beginning, but 4 of the members of the Budget and Finance Committee, in fact, all 5 members of the Budget and Finance Committee, no, 4 of us, 4 of the 5, happen to represent the San Fernando Valley, home to the longest section of the Los Angeles River within the city of Los Angeles, and I'm sure we're all eager to move forward with this in good faith, with the expectation that the San Fernando Valley will not be forgotten in the process. So, got to make that point every time we talk about paying for the rivers.
Of course. I'll just respond to that point. Certainly on behalf of the Ellie Riverworks office and on behalf of the mayor's office broadly, the public access connections, the open space in the valley are always a huge priority, and there's a lot of progress being made on that front as well.
Thank you. So a couple of just really minor kind of technical questions, but so there's a general investigation account and a construction general account. What's the difference?
Well, I'll let my colleagues at the Corps answer it, but this is really actually crucial to how this is formulated.
And how does that change the city's obligation?
Well, the city's obligation would be unchanged based on the schedule of the design agreement and the design schedule, but the Corps of Engineers gets funded as related to this project out of the two funding accounts, one the general investigations and the other construction. The general investigations is for that investigations, and a small part of our annual budget is dedicated, is directed to the investigations. A much larger part is directed to construction. So in the general investigation, can reasonably expect to receive much smaller amounts of funds than once the project moves into the construction phase, which can't happen until after that first set of plans and specs is done, and we're ready to sign a private project partnership agreement.
So, Darrell, if I could add to that, tell me if I have this right. Just so we go through this design phase. It's governed by the design agreement. And there will come a point in the future, in a few years, then we will start discussions with the Army Corps to actually prepare for construction. And when we do that, we actually will be starting to contemplate a separate agreement, this PPA, project partnership agreement that Darrell described. When and if we decide to do that, that is actually when we decide to, okay, we're actually going to build this thing. And that PPA then becomes the governing agreement from then on out. And this design agreement is over with, right? And then from then on out, we would be in that construction general, the larger funding source. So there's some motivation to advance to that stage.
And so that stage begins in 2022 at the conclusion. So after the expenditure of the $8.1 million, the deliverable will be that the design and engineering for this will be completed and will be ready essentially to break ground.
Yes, sir.
But that requires an additional then
Yes.
Consideration of a PPA.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Bloomfield?
In terms of the federal funding, it's in the energy and water appropriations each year, but it's not at this point it's not earmarked on or it's a question. Is it earmarked on a project basis or delineated, since they're not earmarked at this point, or is it just the overall account that gets the funding because of where it is in the process?
It's specifically mentioned in the per project.
So it is called out. So it could be, but Congress could line item the project by project. It's not subsumed within the general the planning budget, or at this point.
Yeah. So every year when the president puts his budget out, there would be a line for a project and an amount on it. And in our federal year 16 and 17, it received a line item in the president's budget. Next year, FY18, it does not. So typically, it would be a specific project line.
Why doesn't it do it next year?
I don't know the answer to that, sir.
You're saying there's nothing in the proposed budget?
For fiscal year 18.
Right.
Next year.
The fiscal year we're in now.
That will come in October 1st.
Right. Yeah, we're in now. Yeah, there starts October 1st. So in the formulation of the president's budget, it wasn't included. But the good news is that the Corps has $400,000 on hand from prior allocated funds. So, and we can match that with $400,000. So we can actually start the work and then prepare for the fiscal year that will start October 1 of 18, the federal fiscal year.
But in the current president's proposed budget, there is not funding for this? Whether it
That's correct.
That is correct, sir.
Which is correct? I'm sorry, I said both.
That it is not in the FY18 budget from the president.
So if Congress does not add it in, then basically the project stops at the end of this year.
If the president's budget is made law, that would be the case. The last few years we've had what's called a work plan, where it goes into the other scenario that you described as the Congress would appropriate funds for the funds type. X dollars would go into the different types of projects. We've got environmental.
That's what I'm getting. So that's where I was hoping we already were in the work plan area, where when Congress appropriates it, it's not to the LA River line item, but it's to work plan or whatever you call it. But what I'm hearing you say, if I hear it correctly, is for this year's budget, the president has zeroed out the funding for the LA River. Has not included funding for the LA River. Unless Congress acts, then this project goes on hold. Is that fair?
It's a scenario that would work. That could play out. The other is the work plan.
But I'm saying, when you say could play out, I understand the could is what Congress can do. But I want to know exactly what happens if the president's budget is, at least this portion of the president's budget is adopted and Congress does not add it back in. Is there any scenario that this project does not go on hold?
Well, we still have the funding that we have right now, the $400,000.
We have last year's funding.
Correct.
$400,000.
And that will carry over.
Which is enough to do last year's work. But in order to move forward with this project, I think it's important to understand this and, frankly, to make it very public. Mm-hmm. And that's why I want to hear it from you all who administer this, exactly what we're talking about. So, correct me if I'm wrong. The President, in his infinite wisdom, sarcasm, did not include funding in his budget for our LA River project. If Congress does not, in its wisdom, add funding back into this, meaning they have to adjust it from somewhere, or then after this $400,000 from last year runs out, our project is stalled. So the money that we're putting in, how much was it this year?
400.
No, the 400 gets matched from last year. That's from last year's budget. We already put that in, right?
That's right. And yeah.
So in this year's budget, you're anticipating that we are going to allocate in our 2018 budget 1.135 million.
That's correct. Yes.
But Congress has not put in their 1.135. And as you said, you're not going to ask us to put in 1.135.
I think we should clarify the fiscal year lineup because the 1 point,
they're on a different fiscal
right. Your point's absolutely right. If the federal government doesn't choose to fund the project, then yes, it will stall. The request for the 1.135 million from the city to match is still preparing for the budget cycle that don't know if it's going to be in or out.
We're assuming that we're going to come up with 1.13, and the mayor's team that's putting together its budget in the near few months is at this moment assuming a 1.13. But what we're assuming is that Congress is going to undo what the president has done. Because unless they do that, we're not putting in 1.13 million, right?
Well, we can't tap into the $400,000 until we sign the design agreement. And I think with the $400,000 that we've identified with your matching $400,000, that we would carry through our fiscal year 18. So would not need any additional federal funds for FY 18, but it would be FY 19, which that president budget is not.
Your fiscal year ends when?
I'm sorry.
Your fiscal year ends?
It ends September 30th.
Okay. That's over very soon. And then your next year is the 1.13.
Our next year is the 800,000.
Yes. It's the 800,000.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
And so then our year comes up before then.
Correct.
Except we know the results of your budget by much sooner than that. Before we have to do our budget, we're going to know in a matter of months whether or not the federal government is going to approve its budget for the following year. So whether or not we put in the 1.135 is going to depend on what happens in Washington over the next 3 or 4 months.
That's exactly right. Yes.
So our budget plans are in flux. I mean, in terms of the 1.135.
Yes.
And even if we put it in, you're saying you're going to get us through September 30 of next year. But if you don't put in the money, then we're not putting in the money, and then the project stops on September 30th. So within the next 4 months, give you CRs and whatever, give you a couple of months, federal government, to be more specific, in the next few weeks, if the federal government, if the Congress doesn't act, then we're basically telling the world that the project is stopping on September 30 of next year.
If the president's budget that I believe comes out around April timeframe has.
No, but you're talking about this. We're not talking about.
No, I think we do need to clarify that. Yeah, the budget request that we need to formulate for the 1.135 would be the budget year. Tell me if I get this wrong. That starts on October 1 of 2018.
Correct. Yes.
Right. So the Corps is currently formulating their requests, which lines up with the city starting to formulate budget requests.
Now you got me confused, and I apologize.
No, it's okay.
Too into the weeds here, but the current president's budget, which has to be adopted by when? By this year, right?
The current
the president's budget proposal. When does it need to be adopted before a CR needs to happen?
President Trump did sign a continuing resolution through, I believe it's December 16th.
Okay, so December 16th. If on December 17th, Congress puts forward a new budget, and it has that 1.135, great. But if it doesn't, then the project stops on September 30th of 2018.
If no additional funds are expected in FY19, the following
fiscal year.
Yeah, may I add, Councilmember, we haven't made the request for the $1.1 million yet. We have not made that request yet. The the federal 400 that's available today to the Corps, and then the city's match, that 800 will take us through the federal fiscal year. So will take us until 30 September of next year. And then, and next year, this fall and spring, we will finalize, we will make our request for the 1.1 million, and the president's budget will come out estimated.
Doesn't that leave a gap? Why is this not taking?
There,
because if you have it, you have to make your requests now. I mean, the requests for fiscal year 18-19 that's the president's budget now, right? He's not making the president's budget proposal is not for fiscal year 17. It's for next year.
So I think the answer is there won't be a gap as the Corps has formulated that we know of now. That there's 400 on each side, 800 total, which would carry all the way through to September 30th, 2018, the end of that fiscal year, and that the request that they would be formulating now for the 1.135, they won't know. They would learn in.
Not a request in for the 1.135 in this year's budget, and the president just didn't do it. I'm assuming, did the Corps request the 1.13 and it just was not adopted by the president?
Yeah, the interworkings of Congress, yes, I'm not sure.
Yes, I mean, but so the Corps, I mean, it just makes sense. So the Corps asked for the money. Mm-hmm. President said no, and now we're kind of hoping to limp along with the 400 from the previous year. But if you go in order of years, that's when the request should have been made already, and it should have been in this year's budget. To do otherwise is to kind of put aside and pretend that that's not disparaging, but I'm saying to kind of make up for the fact that it wasn't in this year's budget for whatever reason. But I think we got to call it out. This president did not put in the money for LA River for this year. He chose not to honor the request and
a criteria that we use when we put future requests for funds out are based on where we are today, and we've been in the review process of preparing what that cost would be, and if there's a design agreement in place, all of our requests and our coordination will be consistent with our plan that we didn't have a year ago or 2 years ago that would speak to future years for beyond FY18. So now that we have a plan and we start the design agreement, we will do all that we can to support meeting that schedule, seeking funds to allow that schedule to be maintained. There is uncertainty, but the requests and the support for meeting that schedule will be done on our side, and the idea is to coordinate all of that so that the city could do that on their side, on your side.
It just would have been cleaner and neater if it was in the budget now, so that we could do our match on it. But I understand you're in a delicate position to say what I'm assuming. But okay, put that issue aside unless you want to continue on that point. I have another issue completely not related.
Just to take one step back from it, what's before us today is approval of the $400,000. So we're always trailing behind them
except for this year, we're going to have to lead them.
No.
They're asking us.
No, because that's what I wanted to, because you're right, because we're kind of skipping over because of the different fiscal years, it's a little confusing to me as well. We're approving $400,000 by the action today. That's in the recommendation that's in the committee report, to approve the $400,000, to find the funding for future years, but to approve the $400,000 deposit today. You've already got $400,000 in your pocket of federal money today.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to have $800,000. We don't become obligated to budget for the next payment until we know whether or not you're going to have that in your budget, right? Because starting next spring, Mr. Blumenfield and I and the other members of the committee are going to be looking at the budget for our fiscal 18-19.
Right.
At the time that we're doing that, the federal budget will or will not already have this in it.
We'd expect to see what would
Bless
be
you.
in fiscal year 19 by that time.
Yes. Yes. The president's budget would come out around that, is expected to come around that time frame.
I think you said in April, right? So by April or so, we'll know what's going to be in federal fiscal year 19-20.
Yes.
No, we'll know what the president's proposed budget is after the State of the Union. I mean, we'll know his proposed budget right around the time that we're doing our budget. Correct. But Congress won't adopt, reject or accept his budget until September. Correct. Hopefully earlier, but realistically, probably not even in September. So
Okay.
we are going to be asked potentially to do the 1.135 without knowing whether or not the feds are going to do it.
But the actual transfer, the appropriation of that fund will be contingent upon the federal side funding it first.
Correct.
The city will only ever be asked to contribute to actual dollars that are ready to go. Is that accurate?
We're going to have to.
We'll budget for
We're going
it.
to have to budget for
Yeah.
it, not knowing.
True.
For certain, and right, and because if we don't, then we're going to create an even greater gap of when the project stops.
Yes.
Right now, you think the project won't have to stop until September of next year, and then if there's money in the budget, and we budgeted in advance anticipating that, then maybe we get to continue in September without a gap.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So sorry, but just this is very, very much related to this. So we approve this today. There's $800,000 in the bank then for federal, for city. Do you begin to spend that right away? Do you start working with that $800,000?
Very soon. Quick. Yes.
Okay. So is there? I don't know how to ask this delicately, but this is a $8 million project. If you have $800,000 and spend it, and then all funding is cut off after that, do we get anything at all of value for 10% of that budget, or would it make more sense to wait until we see whether there's going to be more money in the bank before we spend any of it? Because what I would not want to see is have us blow $400,000, have this entire project get canned, and then we've spent $400,000 on a 5-page executive summary of something that's pending much further work, and we've wasted $400,000.
That's a very good question, and I would let Mark and Daryl attempt to answer the mechanics. But I'll just say from my experience is that the best indicator of project success in these projects is the willingness on both sides to move forward in the process. That's what I've seen.
Well, we're willing.
Right, exactly.
I mean, we've shown our
I would worry that we would end up waiting for a resolution that wouldn't come. But point taken, though.
Yeah, I'll just say that the major tangibles for with that 800,000 is a survey and a water analysis.
So the water analysis being a study of the hydrology of the 11-mile area?
Yes.
So that actually would be a useful
That'd be useful
product.
no matter what we end up.
Yes, it would.
Okay. I'm sorry, Bob.
No, it's all right. And invariably what's going to happen is these numbers are going to go up. I mean, I spent a lot of time, worked for the Army Corps on Hanson Dam for years when I worked for a congressman and been through this process. And what's going to happen is there's going to be delay, and then that's going to cause the Army Corps estimates to go way up. And it's just, I guarantee you, this number will be much higher by the time we get there. I hope not, but that's what's going to happen, and I'll put as much money on it as anybody wants to. So anyway, I think for our actions today, I think we move forward and it makes sense. I'm very concerned that I wish it had been put in the budget already. Hopefully it's it's because of the fact that you can kind of stretch it till next year, but I think it's a point of concern. But moving to other issues, high-speed rail, does this have any, we haven't figured out how we're spending all the money, and is it possible that alignments could change that could screw this up?
Very good question. My best understanding of the high-speed rail alignment that currently is proposed actually would come through this area on the west bank of the river, and I think that with enough planning, it wouldn't have we could limit the detrimental impact. The biggest concern they would have is that high-speed rail has to have a closed corridor as it comes through. So as we implement this project and have access to this project, if high-speed rail then has to come through and disrupt that access, then I would think that we would ask the high-speed rail authority to work on ameliorating that situation. But it's many years out, and there's a lot of time to plan for that.
Kind of, but it's also it's like measure twice, cut once. My fear is we're going down this road spending money, and this is good money, and I'm 100% behind the river, and went and lobbied on it. I'm bullish on the river as anybody. And I don't know what to do about it, but I am very concerned that we are putting risk in terms of redesign. And as my experience with the Army Corps with Hanson Dam and some of these things, redesign ends up costing a lot of money. I guess it's true with any contractor that's not as publicly minded even as the Corps and as all of us. Is there anything we can do to mitigate that or to
I believe there is. I think it's a really good question. Again, the high-speed rail team here in LA actually has been very proactive in engaging with our river office and others, and actually asking the question, how can we help achieve your goals, help the river goals? And we've had actually a series of discussions with them. I've been very impressed with their desire to, in good faith, help actually advance the river goals. So this project would certainly be something that we would closely coordinate with the high-speed rail team here. And there would be certainly technical input groups that will be advising this process, and I think high-speed rail would be a critical component.
I mean, that's good, but it doesn't really ameliorate my fear. I don't know what to do about it, but it is what it is. Very random question. There was something in here about certificate regarding lobbying. What does that mean in terms of city officials having discussions with federal counterparts regarding river restoration and that kind of thing?
So, my understanding of the certificate regarding lobbying is it limits the way that we can spend money to influence this particular project. Do I have that correct? It's not necessarily a moratorium on any kind of discussion or lobbying activity in general. Is that accurate?
And it prevents the crediting of any resources that you'd spend on lobbying to be credited on the design process, on the design agreement.
Okay.
Does it limit in any way or restrict in any way council members' ability to speak to their counterparts? If I go to Washington, and I went to Washington already on this project, and spend some money going there, with one of the express purposes of that trip is to talk to officials about the river, assuming the money doesn't come out of the river pot, it comes out of my discretionary pot or some other pot of money to fund that. Is there a legal limitation, or is there a concern? Certainly I don't want to cross any laws or have any other council member inadvertently do that, or any other city official. So the question is, what do those restrictions really mean to us, or is it just a restriction on the use of these particular funds?
It's a restriction on the funds specific that will be credited on the design agreement.
Okay, so as long as, if we're dealing with the river and as long as it's coming out of other city funds that we need to go. There's no restrictions, and there's no restrictions on council members as individuals or city officials as individuals from lobbying on. It's really more about we can't hire somebody with these funds to go do something. It's not about what we do as a city. Is that fair?
That is fair, that is correct, and we'll bring that back to our council just to verify, but that's my experience.
Because even if we spend money on a city lobbyist, and of the myriad of things we ask them to do, we may say, why don't you check on the river on this, that, and the other, and we don't want to be afoul. That lobbyist money is not coming out of the river money.
And that would be legitimate.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Thanks. Good question.
Okay, anything else? Any objections? Okay, so the recommendation is to concur in the recommendations of the Arts, Entertainment, Parks, and River Committee. So if there's no objection to that, it will be it won't be the action of the committee. It'll be the recommendation of the chair and Mr. Blumenfield to concur in that committee's recommendations. So thank you all very much. Thank you for your presentation and for your patience.
Sure. Thank you.
And thank you. It's a pleasure. Are there any other items before the committee?
No, sir, that clears the desk.
All right, very good. Then we are adjourned. Thank you.